All right, so we have a few minutes of mental break, brain break. You can have physical break, just move around a little bit. So, and in 3 seconds, 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, we have presentation, 2 keynote speakers. Sarah Murzik from the UK. She will deliver her keynote speech talk about her project, and Amber Chandler at 12 o'clock. So Sarah, you can set up your presentation. You have your co-host rights.
All right, let me just check if everything is working.
Yeah.
It's very, very nice to see you all. Have a little extra moment of breathing and preparing while I check just one last thing.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we all need it.
I will stop sharing. So you.
Thank you.
Take away.
While Sarah gets her presentation ready, I'll give her a little introduction as everybody is now back in this room. Welcome back, everyone, and good morning or night, depending where you are, or afternoon. My name is Julia Loda, and I'm the president of the Sigma Tau chapter of KDP, and I'd like to welcome you all to this very important session in our keynote. It's my pleasure to introduce Sarah Murzik, and we are so excited to have her on with us this morning. She comes to us all the way from the United Kingdom, and today she's going to be speaking on the International SEND Remote Education Project. So without further ado, Sarah, please take it away when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I am very, very glad to be here with you today. I will now share my screen. My presentation is in Canva, like many of you use as well. It's absolute best solution for presentations, in my opinion. So my presentation, let me start from the beginning. There we go. Not to reveal anything. Yeah. Do I need to click record, or is it recording?
It's a recording.
Okay. Oh no, wrong button, of course. Yeah, 1 second. You know, when you need to present and then you instantly become very silly about these things.
Yeah. But it's okay.
All right. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So as I was introduced earlier, my name is Sarah Murzik, and I am Head of Autism Research and Development in Abbottsley School. Abbottsley School is my new place of employment. I've been here for a year now, and it's a big specialist school for children and young people who are autistic and have some learning difficulties. So 100% of our students are autistic, and that is just a wonderful group of students to actually work on these projects with. Before this, I was doing my PhD at Edgehill University, which was focusing on augmented reality for inclusive education, where I was producing different kind of toys for mainly for ADHD population, but actually it turns out to be very interesting for everyone. Some of you might have seen me on Digital Creativity Lab, which is on YouTube. That was a weekly workshop that I led with young people where we were exploring different tools online, and we actually did it throughout the pandemic to work on our mental health, to kind of talk about topics of emotional, social, and mental well-being through different digital tools. But I've met Professor Smirnova at EdMedia conference. I think it was 2-3 years ago now. Time passes really quickly when we're having fun, I guess. So in EdMedia conference, I was presenting my research for the first time, and since then, a lot of things have changed. So I'm really, really glad to be able to actually present to you today all the new things that I've been working on. Feel free to drop any questions that you have in chat, and in the end, I will go through them a little bit, and you can also, at that moment, unmute and share your experiences. We'll have time, I promise. So when I was preparing this presentation, I realized that I have a really, really difficult task here when I'm talking about SEND population, which is an acronym that we use in the UK. I realized later that in the US, you more use SEN, so special educational needs and disabilities. It's a very, very diverse and big group of people. A lot of them, a lot of that neurodiversity we can see, and a lot of it we cannot. I wanted to actually highlight to you that importance of what I'm saying here today is not just for some students that we work with, or for some groups of learners, but actually it makes sense to us here as well, because 1 in 10 of all of us have dyslexia. 1 in 20 have ADHD, 1 in 67 have autism, 1 in 20 have dyscalculia, and 1 in 10 have dyspraxia. Those numbers are just very general, but you can imagine that those things that we cannot see are really difficult to recognize in ourselves and then ask for help and diagnosis. So I am actually aware that out of us 34 here, probably someone will be dyslexic, someone will have ADHD, someone will have autism, someone will be on the pathway, on the spectrum, somewhere there. So all of these strategies actually are really important to be embedded into everything that we're doing at all times through this idea of universal design that Karen and Laura presented yesterday, I think. So key themes that I'm going to be talking about today, not directly, but actually in a discrete way, where I'm going to be covering more practical, tangible things. But I want you to keep in mind that individuality, that when I talk about some groups of students or students with SEND, that I actually, I'm not trying to make a blanket solution for everyone, but actually make you aware of all unique personalities and individualities that we have in our classes. And actually keep in our minds that diversity, which usually leads to divide. We've talked a lot about digital divide, about socioeconomic divide, and how these differences became more obvious in this time of pandemic. And I think it just opened our eyes to some things that were there before, to some inequalities that were very much part of someone's reality before the pandemic as well. So this didn't change much for some people. However, regardless if we're teaching remotely, if we're teaching on site, if we're teaching in person, if we're having a discussion in the garden, there needs to be a certain level of support and scaffolding if we want to maximize someone's success and someone's understanding. It would, of course, be of great benefit to understand the whole holistic and ecological environment of a person, so that that person has its closest friends and family, that person has a wider circles of support and networks, that we all actually work together for that same goal. And as a lot of people say, it takes a whole village and it takes, I would say, 2 or 3 villages to do it correctly in remote education. So yeah, I did this presentation a few weeks back with some mainstream teachers, early career teachers, who described it as truth bombs. So I wanted to also include that, because I think it's sometimes important to kind of shake our perceptions and thinking a little bit. So I'm going to be dropping some truth bombs. I really, really hope that they're not going to be as shocking to you, because that's reality. And I would love to think that everyone's aware of those things. So let's see. By the time I finish, maybe some of you will discover new things. So I wanted to tell you about SEND, so Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Remote Education project that I was leading. This project is something that I've been working on for a year since I've joined the school. But honestly, literature is filled with these topics. And actually, when I went through these things, my motivation was much greater and wider than just one school. So that quickly became an international project. So in reading that literature, I've seen some potential in autistic students specifically, because a lot of them who have social anxiety and different kinds of maybe communication or interaction difficulties, they benefit from homeschooling or from remote education in a way. That was kind of a potential that I wanted to explore a little bit more, but then I came to a barrier. Around 1 million children in the UK do not have adequate access to suitable device or internet connectivity at home. That's really a slap in the face when you try to work on a potential that's actually stopped by such a this kind of barrier is something that can be fixed with money, but there are bigger problems in life that cannot. So it really hurts me deep down when our barriers are something that we can just buy. Anyway, moving on to why do we need this? And
Sarah, there is sound. Sound is a little bit going back and forth, louder.
oh,
yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
I'll try my best. Sorry.
Okay.
So 40% of schools indicated, so that was last year, that lack of teachers' skills to adapt their teaching and learning was the biggest challenge during distance learning. Of course, that's not any news to us because we've been talking about this for the last 2 days. So I wanted to give you a little national picture of the UK because I'm aware that a lot of you are in the US, and I'm not sure if we share some problems or they're completely different because of our different national pictures. So I'm looking forward to your feedback on this. So in the UK, our teachers have reported on different
Sarah,
yeah.
Do you have a headset? Because
yes.
Okay, please. It will be better. Yeah. Did anybody experience breaking of the sound?
Yes. Yes, we see that in the chat as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Started out fine.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's much better. Okay.
Excellent. There we go. We sorted first out of many problems that I'm going to talk about today. That's tech. So, yes, as I was saying, I really look forward to your feedback on this because I do believe across nations we might have same problems, so same solutions might work for us. Teachers in the UK have been reporting on engagement in remote learning, as vague as it sounds. And they reported on different groups of people, different groups of pupils or students who are engaging less. And the biggest group was pupils who had limited access to IT or study space. That's something that was mentioned in previous keynotes as well. And then we have a group of vulnerable pupils. So that in the UK counts as all the pupils who have their special educational plans, all the pupils who are either in need or those who are in risk or those who are in care. And then we have a special group of pupils who are those who attend special schools, so special educational needs and disabilities group. Pupil premium are those who face social and economical difficulties. And of course, we have young carers, those students who have different responsibilities than their peers, who actually take care of an adult or someone else in their household. So if you look at this statistic, it really shows you how much there is a need for this focus. So I'm really looking forward to your feedback on that. And I wanted to share with you then one quote. This is from our Chief Executive at National Foundation for Educational Research. Carol Willis, she said that there are considerable differences in the levels of pupils' engagement in remote learning, particularly amongst the most disadvantaged pupils. Nothing new. This supports a growing evidence base highlighting the risk of the attainment gap widening as a result of this pandemic. There is a pressing need for a comprehensive and long-term plan to address this issue. That was kind of our starting point. We wanted to be part of that comprehensive and long-term plan because so far, most of the plans that we've seen have failed special education and our pupils. They've been tailored to majority of students. So it was a quick solution that wanted to cover as many learners as possible. However, if you fall on either side of that graph, then whatever solution was, it wasn't available or it wasn't suitable for you. That kind of inequality hurts me deeply. So I wanted to put all my effort into a project that will focus specifically on strategies, on ideas, on collective support that we can have from teachers, for teachers in remote education for special education pupils. I just wanted to say, in my school, we have students who are 3 years old and all the way up to 19. And before my position here, I was working in university. So what I am presenting here, I'm trying to actually make it as useful to all of you, no matter which area or age group you teach or will teach, because these things do change. So this project is going on for a year. We're hoping to kind of close it this December, but you know, every project kind of has its own legacy afterwards. And we realize that this is a project that you cannot really conclude, that this is a work in progress draft that never completes, because there are new strategies coming out and there are new people who we meet who have fantastic new ideas. And all of you here today are my new group of exciting creative people who are going to help me finish this with more ideas. So last December, we did a review of research on remote education. So I went through all the possible literature and research that was there on remote education, distance learning. At that point, we didn't have a lot of pandemic pedagogy research published, because it takes a while to publish things in real life, around 9, 10, 12 months. So we didn't at that point yet have COVID pandemic research, but everything else that was useful was digital learning, distance learning, all the things that we actually had before, which we just put into a different use. So in that month, in December, I've decided to launch a survey on remote education practice among teachers. By international, I meant across the world, and I was asking different questions, both quantitative and qualitative, because I wanted to actually get that richness of data rather than just yes and no, how many. I'm not that kind of researcher, I guess. I'm going to tell you more in detail about each of these, but just to kind of summarize it, after the survey in January, we've kind of combined all the things from that survey, all the strategies, all the ideas into a toolkit. And that toolkit is available and you can find it and download it and share it and whatever else, which led us to realize that toolkit does not do magic by itself and that we need to actually offer support that's on the ground for our Liverpool special schools. We have 12 and I've met with all 12. I've done some different strategies with them, different support programs with them. And I've launched a pilot. So we had a few case studies, and this December, I am hoping that we're going to produce and launch our report and guidelines, which stem from everything we've learned in this project that could then be useful for mainstream schools, which would be general education in the USA. Yes, sorry. So survey. By survey, I meant 100 teachers from 13 countries across 4 continents. It was very, very interesting and eye-opening experience to read that, because problems that I thought were problems were absolutely not problems in some other countries, and they had completely different problems. That was my biggest revelation at the time when I was trying to find out who had which devices, how were they distributed. But actually, it came to me then when I was interviewing and reading surveys from South Africa, that a lot of them don't have access to electricity. So it really makes no sense to give a student a laptop because there's no electricity. So it just puts you into different perspective when you realize that your problems are not someone else's problems at all, that there are worse things in life. And even more important, I've heard about dangers of giving someone a laptop in South Africa. So this is a story of higher education in South Africa, where students have been given laptops, but that would put them in more danger because someone will try to rob that laptop, and in that process they could get hurt. So that made me realize that survey itself is not a way to get data. It's not a way to collect stories. It's a way to get your answers from questions that you thought would be appropriate. But to get the right questions, you need to go and talk to people. So I wanted to just share with you what I've seen through the survey. So questions that I've asked weren't just quantitative. I did ask what kind of devices did you get? Did your school provide it, or did you have it? Then did you get trained to use those devices? Can you use them actually? How many hours of that training? Do your parents know how to use devices? Do they have them? And all the way somehow to which activities did you deliver during COVID pandemic? And this was all focused on students with autism, autistic students. And you would be surprised to see that live teaching, of course, was amongst most frequently delivered. That's something that was promoted on all channels everywhere. Everyone's doing live teaching. But the other, so 40% who didn't deliver live teaching had a really good reason not to, and that's direct communication and interaction over Zoom, which can be difficult for some. And I had some wonderful quotes from it about eye contact and intensity of Zoom, which I'm sure we all can kind of identify with. I was also a bit disappointed when I read some answers about teaching staff who would make presentations in PowerPoint, send those presentations for students to go through them individually and write something afterwards. So that was completely misunderstood purpose of a software. PowerPoint is there for us to present, not to make something for other people to present to themselves. So there was a lot of problems that I've seen here as well. I'm not going to go in depth because you can actually read all of these things in a toolkit that I'm going to share. Interesting, most interesting two questions, and two that I really did put the most emphasis on. Which activities worked, which activities didn't work, and why? Which were engaging, which you managed to deliver in the way that you wanted to, which were effective for learning. And actually, it was quite interesting because, again, data that I'm showing you here, these graphs, cannot capture all the text that was below it, which was about how to use videos, when to use them, and how for some students they're actually perfect because you can stop them, you can continue playing when you want, and in terms of sensory, you can lower the volume or you can increase the volume depending on how you prefer to hear someone, which you cannot do in a classroom. So some students really did benefit from it, and some parents would send those magical emails saying how much their child is thriving in this environment. And of course, now we're seeing a little backlash of those students needing to go back to school where everything is loud and a lot of students come in together and there's assemblies and stuff. So you can imagine, autistic school is actually a great place to put all of these things to test. Because I'm sure in your classes you have at least one person who is autistic and is either masking or is struggling or both. So yeah, I've then put all the things that I've collected, and that's huge amount of data, into a toolkit. It's not just graphs, it's full quotations from teachers so that you can see in their words and connect with them, with their experience. A lot of teachers were from the USA, so I think it's going to be relevant for everyone. Here you have a QR code, but I'm also going to add a link to chat after I'm done, and I'm happy to, share it on Twitter or whatever else you need it from. This is free, completely free, and available for everyone, because my idea behind it was that we need communities of practice who will save us time and save us resources by sharing what we already know. Everyone can come up with these things, but it takes time to go through all the tools, check how they're working, see if they're available free or not, which is the link for them, can you access them easily. All of those things teachers have been doing around the world, and I think it's really valuable to have that kind of collaborative document where everyone shares what they know. I don't know what you think, but I think it's very, very useful. And then we come to the next part of my project, which was support for schools. I did create a toolkit. I did send it to everyone, and then surprisingly, it didn't really change educational practice, because our teachers in special schools, a lot of them have a lot to do, so they didn't have time to go through it. A lot of them didn't know where to start, and I would say majority didn't feel that it was appropriate or needed for their students. So I decided to go directly to schools, ask them about their problems, try to support them. And I've come up with different modalities of support. So we had group sessions on Zoom where I bring in different colleagues from university or someone who is researching remote education, so that we can hear latest findings and they get a chance to disseminate those findings with those teachers. And those group sessions were great. Teachers did love it. I did then go back to school sessions where I would go to each school and check how they're doing and what their problems are. How can I best use my time and knowledge to support them there on the spot, because that's what's needed, on ground support, and a face alongside the toolkit, so that they don't think it's another incentive from the government. Here's how to do it, go and do it. If there's a person, if there's a face, if we're making those connections and relationships, it works so much better. It's an ongoing theme, I think, of this conference, relationships and emotions. So I also decided to do individual consultation with school leaders and administrators. I've heard in one of the groups yesterday a little joint discussion on administration of schools and how they don't understand practice and teachers. And I did recognize that, and I went straight to them directly to talk from a research perspective, from a global perspective. This is what other schools are doing. This is what you need to do. These are the problems that our teachers are facing. This is how they're feeling. And you would be surprised, that made a lot of change. So I did change minds and hearts of teachers, but they were all kind of dependent on their leaders and administrators. So if you want to do something like this, I would suggest bottom up on this list that I've created. So start with individual consultation with leaders and administrators, and then go to teachers, because they are really the makers of change, I think. And I really do hope that you'll be able to help me, because I know this group of experts is just extremely valuable globally, not just in your local environments. We're creating a report which is going to summarize all the recommendations from this project, and in which I'm sure a lot of findings from this conference are going to feature. It's going to be called, it is called Remote and Blended Learning, Surviving and Thriving in the New Normal. That's going to be published in December 21. It's again going to be free copy for everyone. But what I would like you to do, because I'm a big fan of co-production, of collaboration, when I'm finished with what I have, I would like to send to some of my colleagues that copy so that they can comment on it, that they can contribute with their expertise, that we can make that big, rich final copy. So if you are interested in that, you can sign up for your free preprint copy. I'm not sure yet how. I understand that you can put your emails in the chat, but I would somehow like to safeguard your data. So if you want, I will put my email in a chat, and you can then contact me either on Twitter or anywhere to actually join that group who's gonna contribute a little bit to the final copy and make sure that it's relevant to everyone around. Focus on in this report compared to this one, the first one, is that there's a focus on relationships, well-being for both students, staff, and families, especially staff, because in the first part of the year, in January, we were very much in the pandemic, and we were still focusing on students and families and getting the best possible results on both academic and emotional, social side of development. However, I do feel that in the UK, we've kind of forgotten our staff who have been struggling in that period, especially. And I think this guide, this report is going to reflect on that highly. Guidelines for enriching your educational offer in post-pandemic pedagogy is actually the topic of this conference. So I am feeling really, really honored to be able to share what I'm doing and to be able to highlight what you're doing. And now, the truth bomb part. I wanted to show you challenges and lessons that we've learned from this project. I'm gonna summarize the challenges first. I've kind of grouped them into categories, but there's just so many stories and so many experiences that I feel it's wrong even to generalize in that way, but I do know you're going to value if I'm able to show you some and to be able to share with you emotions and experiences of people. So challenges that I've found and kind of wanted to talk about today are support, so lack of support or type of support and all of that, access, environment, and design. I'm gonna talk about lessons through the same concept. So this is just gonna be your structure. So inadequate environment is one of the things that we found in our research. You have some quotations here which feature not only autistic population and their struggles with Zoom and those social, very face-focused technologies, but actually people's homes, and the fact that we finally opened that door to other people's houses, homes, and realities, and it was shocking for some to see differences, and it was difficult to open up in that way, to finally be comfortable sitting in your sofa, smiling on the camera. So as a nation and as a race, the whole planet actually went over that barrier of our own space, of our own safety, in a way, privacy. So that was a big deal in pandemic. And I think in some ways, it was also inadequate. We still need to maintain our professional identity, same as our students who need to maintain the idea of school and idea of home. So that was difficult. For a lot of students, they couldn't concentrate on work, not only because of space. I would say there was a lot of trauma, a lot of emotions, a lot of changes, everything. But I would often hear, home is home, school is school. I cannot work on school stuff at home. Parents did struggle with that as well, especially visible in those moments where socioeconomic differences, where you have families who are big, who have a lot of children, a lot of members in general, and then you have busy, noisy households which is usually very friendly, very welcomed in our communities because it's that family feeling. But if at 9 o'clock, everyone needs to be on their different laptop in some corner trying to be focused on what's going on, it's very, very difficult, especially for parents. I would emphasize parents here because they were working at home sometimes, trying to do well and trying to overcome this change for themselves while their children are learning and they need to support them. And some parents didn't have that luxury, so they were key workers in hospitals and they needed to organize childcare and a lot of different things. So in terms of environment, it was very difficult. It's difficult in distance learning as well. It's difficult as a concept. Environment, when we are all remotely, is abstract. So it's a collective idea of all of our homes. So when we organize something, we need to be aware and we need to anticipate all the difficulties that could come with that. In special education, there was this problem of specialist equipment. We have sensory rooms, we have quiet rooms, we have all the different tools and equipment that we're using that now we cannot send to students because we're sharing all of that across the school. That was a big difficult thing, but we've organized workshops for parents to create sensory items which kind of connected communities more tightly together. One thing that we won't be able to change if we go into another lockdown is not having access to community spaces. Our students learn in situations the best. So sometimes we have lessons which are just about crossing the road, just about going into a cafe, ordering something. So those things were impossible. But I just do hope that vulnerable population will be on the forefront of some other crisis and we won't be in this situation again. Another black slide is about support, and that's something that we're all very aware of. We all had insufficient support in some way. Parents needed to work from home during the sessions and they weren't able to support their children in home learning. I know a lot of your students can do it independently, individually, by themselves, and they like to do it that way. But our students often need support either to motivate them to continue or to explain something further or to support them in digital learning so that they can, because maybe they don't have digital skills, but they would like to learn maths. So yeah, from teachers' side, it was always parents. Parents are not engaged. Parents don't have time. Parents are not supporting enough. And from parental side, it was, I don't have enough support or time or resources to be able to organize all of this. And of course, specialist therapies, which were already very, very important and not remotely available, that affected our students' readiness to learn. So if you have dyslexia, if you have speech and language difficulties, and you don't see your speech and language therapist, that might have greater effect on your readiness to learn than anything else. So whoever is trying to teach you math afterwards is actually in a really difficult position, and you shouldn't be trying to learn maths, you should be working on speech and language, for example. Of course, younger students and problem of trying to teach someone something with digital technology while they don't have skills of ICT yet is just ridiculous. But we overcame that somehow with the creativity of our students, of our teachers. And yeah, I need to give it to them because it was really, really difficult to be a teacher at that time. And this final quote here really tells you, shares that emotion and burden of being that person. So to read it out for you, we offer social times for students, but listening to their chats and problems they discuss can be difficult for me. I'm going through equally stressful time in my personal life, and I don't think I can offer support for them if I'm on the edge myself. So I'm sure that's touching for a lot of you because teachers are there to support, teachers are there to fix problems for our students when parents are not there or when parents cannot do it. And unfortunately, we did not think enough about our teachers and who fixes their problems. So big feature of this new guide is actually support, psychological and actual tangible support in time and money, in all the different things that a person needs to feel safe, to feel supported, to feel valued, that they can do their job well. Because all of these things that we're talking about today and yesterday and the day before are great and are extras that we can improve on. But I think we're often missing the basics, and basics are emotions, relationships, and psychological safety, all the things that we as people, all of us, need to be able to focus on anything else. So support is a big one. I'm sure you would agree. Next one is ineffective design. That was very, very intense in field of special education, because most of the things that were developed, that were bombarded to teachers, are things, solutions, apps, tools, which are made for mainstream population. So our teachers were naturally trying to do the best for their students, but sometimes by design, it's not effective. I really liked the presentation yesterday, last night for me, but it's probably last afternoon for you or something. Yeah, it was Karen and Lori. They were talking about universal design, and they've mentioned all of these problems. How actually by design we need to anticipate things, anticipate needs, anticipate all the different people who are going to be joining, how they're going to be joining, what's going to be their emotional state, what device they're going to use, is it going to be loud in their house, are they going to be in a park? All of those things need to be involved in design phase, not later when we have a tool and then realize, oh, it doesn't work for this, oh, it doesn't work for that, so let's patch it up somehow. Now that we have time to think about those things, it does seem difficult to start from scratch and design based on all these new ideas, but it's needed. It's the only right way forward, because until we do that, we're going to forget a big group of people who often cannot tell you what is wrong, or are not either not able to or feel stigmatized in needing to fit in. So if someone is struggling with our learning systems, I truly believe that we are the ones who need to see that before they face a problem. Our teachers, so many of them mentioned overwhelming number of educational apps and platforms. Cognitive load, both for teachers and for students, was increasing because of that. They needed to choose. They needed to organize themselves among these apps, as we usually say, app smashing. So they would combine different apps to make it as engaging for students, but that would increase complexity, because you need certain brain power to understand app that you're using and to understand the content that's being taught through that app. And same goes for teacher, plus the addition of pedagogy of that specific app. How would you use it best to reach the goal you have? So I think if someone would measure a cognitive load of a very engaging presentation, which jumps from collaborative documents to videos to write something by yourself to show and tell, the whole idea behind it and the plan is incredibly complex. And that's what's making our staff extremely exhausted. As this teacher here says, I am just exhausted with new exciting trends. So often I spend time exploring new promising apps just to find out that they cannot be adapted for SEN. That's a sad truth, but I think if we're louder, if more of us are aware of it, it's just not going to be acceptable to have an app that is not able to change colors into more contrast, to change font into something that's better for dyslexic students to add little images to follow it, to have some visual structure. All of that is really simple when you think about it, and when you think about it from a design perspective at the start. Right, last one, last black slide, I promise. This is a bit of a downer always. Unequal access. Many of our students do not have access to laptops or share one with siblings. That is the most common sentence I would hear. Problem is us. So in the UK, when we were trying to figure out how we're going to do this, we did a huge big survey, and all schools needed to share information about their families. Do they have laptop at home? And that question in itself has hidden every bit of information that we needed to know. I'm going to tell you more about it a little bit later, because it's actually paradoxical what we've done. But it all started with this question: do you have a laptop at home? Yes, I do. Yes, but but it was just an option of yes, I do have a laptop at home. Anyway, it's not just about laptops. We all know that. It's also internet. Internet connection in the last year, I think it was the biggest luxury and biggest commodity that we had. Something that's fast enough, something that doesn't break, something that no one turns off on the other side of the road. Or it was just a non-stop conversation about internet connection and complex logging process, and families needing to support, struggling with that. All of that time is a luxury. If you have a young carer who needs to take care of their mother or father or someone in the family who might be experiencing COVID at that time, time is luxury for them. So they often don't access, not because they don't have a laptop, not because they don't know how to use it, but actually because that's not their priority. They have different things that they need to take care of. So we need to think about those things as well. Time. If you're at home, of course, your attention is split between a million different things. So it's really important to be focused on what is there. And if you're not, it's better to just skip the lesson, in my opinion. One more thing is mental health. If you are depressed, if your student is depressed, it's very easy to not attend the lecture or to not be present online. And that actually, again, goes in a loop and affects your mental health. If you don't have that social input, if you're not around other people, it's very easy to isolate. And when we talk about access, lack of access also means more mental health problems. So that's the need for actually making sure that access is something that everyone has, something that everyone can easily get for themselves, that they can access who they need, when they need, for what they need. But yeah, that's a big task, isn't it? Now to more light topics. I'm going to go quickly through lessons that we've learned, and then I'm going to finish with some actions that I have for you. So again, support, access, environment, design. In creating safe and kind environment, we need to think about physical safety and psychological safety. Physical safety came to light through last year through safeguarding in privacy, not just privacy of our own homes, but actually safeguarding of all the people who are involved in a Zoom call, whose responsibility is to safeguard what happens on the screen. Next is psychological safety and this need for safe and understanding community. If we skip that step, then no matter what we do, people are either not going to join or not going to enjoy, not going to join fully with trust, and not going to be safe to experiment, to share their views. We need to have a holistic approach in this and respect people's realities. Something that I don't think is a problem, for someone else is a really, really big problem. They see it as the biggest challenge of their life. And I need to respect that because that's their reality. So being aware of those things, being aware of all possible problems that people can have and anticipate those challenges is the most important thing in leading a successful remote learning situation. Whoever is the leader of it, whoever is facilitating,
needs to communicate those problems, those challenges in advance. So don't wait for someone to say that they cannot read your font correctly, but actually open up in the start and say, if I'm aware that some of you might not be comfortable with this, so if that's you, do this. If that's you, do that. That way you're using power dynamic of your authority with your students to actually help them feel safe, help them feel kind of understood, even when they don't understand themselves. So that's needed, very, very needed, being able to hold the room. In terms of support, what can we do? We need to support teachers in creating appropriate and meaningful quality education. We need to support families in creating optimal routines and environments for learning, and we need to support students in academic, pastoral, and social activities. A lot of things that I've suggested there, and maybe less clear practical solutions how to achieve that. But two things that I would say are emotions first. In everything that you do, address them, communicate them, and value them. And all behavior is communication. If someone is behaving in some way, that just means that they're trying to communicate something. Sometimes students don't have expressive communication tools and skills that we would use. So respect that and ask instead of them. Universal design. I'm not going to go in depth here because of lovely presentations that we had the other day, but I just think we don't need the illusion of competence through complexity. Screens full of different things, digital classrooms with all the colorful and popping interactive things. That's all nice, but it kind of gives an illusion of competence where insecure teachers would put everything they have on screen to show that they've got it. We're slowly moving back from that, back to those basics and focusing on what's necessary. It's all possible, but what is necessary? And creating that optimal learning environment through simple things, through visual support, through focusing on purposeful leading and sequence of concepts, to consistency. So if this is the structure that you're following, follow it every day so that people feel safe and know what's coming. And I always say co-produce things. If you're not sure if it works, ask student if this looks good, if they understand it, would they like a different color? Would they like it differently? What would they prefer for the next group? So now that you know how to count to 10, how do you think young students will like to learn that? So always involve them in co-production, because then they have ownership and they feel important and they feel like there's a purpose for them. Inclusive access for all. Finally, the question, do you have a laptop at home? We did a big mistake of asking that question without actually going to people, knocking on their door, seeing how do they use laptops? How does that laptop look like? Does it have a camera, not have a camera? Can it run Chrome? Can it not run Chrome? Do they know how to use it? And how many members should use it at 9 a.m. on a Monday? So those are all the questions that we needed to ask. We shouldn't have asked, do you have a laptop at home? Because a lot of people will answer yes. Yes, but I need to use it for work. Yes, but I have 4 children and all of them need it at 9 o'clock. Yes, but it's very old and it doesn't really work. Or yes, it's in a different language and no one knows how to use it. All these problems are real, and I think we need to be courageous to go and talk with people rather than sending a survey. After my international survey with teachers, I've talked with a lot of people in a way that I didn't expect. Most quality conversations I've had were in front of houses of families where I would show them on a laptop how to log in, because there is no way to do that until they can log in. So problems were different, solutions were different, lessons were many. And I think we need to share them, not just as practitioners we are, like teachers, but also have that joint learning in digital literacy with families and students. So if in this conference we had families and students, we did have some students, it would make the whole learning better, because we all went through the same path and we've all seen things. So students as co-producers, co-designers of learning tools would be my wish if we can get there. Last thing, what is your action? So to summarize my presentation, I wanted to actually invite you to make a change rather than just point at problems. I want you to be aware and to anticipate all the things that I've pointed out to you, to communicate them before they're communicated to you, to be that brave person that understands rather than waiting for someone to ask for support. And yeah, to offer support to everyone rather than those who you see that they need it. I would also suggest that we all collaborate, because in general, it saves us time, it saves us resources. It doesn't mean that someone knows more than the other person. It just means that someone can save time by talking to you rather than investigating the whole thing by themselves. There was a lot of repetition of research in pandemic, and I think if we would collaborate better, we could focus on different things, more wider problems maybe. Final thought would be to innovate caringly, to be careful how you innovate, and to research courageously, to not be afraid to ask extra questions, even if you don't have solutions for them. I did discover more challenges than I started with, but it meant a lot to me, because I think by sharing challenges, we can all figure out solutions for ourselves. I always say in the end, that you should imagine development as a train. And if you're the one leading it, if you're the first person leading the train, you need to actually work on those who are in the last few carriages, because if you don't go in the same speed, this train is going to break very, very quickly. So work with people who are not as confident, because I'm sure that they can become more confident. And if you learn even more and even more, it's probably not as valuable to the institution that you work in. But if you work with those who are not there yet, you're all going to be going in the same speed, and it's all going to be nice and harmonious. So yeah, that's kind of all from me. I know I'm a little bit longer than I was supposed to. We still have 5 minutes to talk. So I would like you to share experiences with me, to share your challenges or things that you've experienced that I maybe don't know yet. I would love that. So I will open the stage to whoever wants to talk, and I'm sharing my Twitter handle with you. I am quite active on Twitter and always happy to collaborate and join forces, because I think it's really, really good. So I'm stopping my presentation now. Oh, I'm in darkness, I'm just realizing. Feel free to ask questions while I go through chat. Oh, nice. Go for it.
Thank you, Sarah. It was really amazing to hear. And I think Katie interviewed you during January, right? You are in the middle of your project, and you were just planning to publish it, and it's great that you are about to publish it. It's wonderful, and yes, it's we all you kind of share the same issues and problems and challenges that everybody
across the world. It kind of sums up to the same thing. I did actually plan to publish the guide in November, but then we decided, due to this conference, that we can wait for another month and just add contributions from others, because most of these people I haven't met before, and I would really value inputs like I did from those 100 teachers who helped me with my thinking. So, if you have something useful, it takes a minute to kind of type it up. I will search further if you need to. Just pop a link, and I will make sure that more people hear about it. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I would like to just add a piece to what has been said and what you've said, and to make a connection between some of the presentations from yesterday. Universal design for learning comes out of research for special education. It started many years ago, and we are just beginning to see it carrying over into what is the general population. In special education, we have always looked at ways for access. We've always looked at multiple ways of accessing our learners and having our learners being able to share what they know. We use assistive technology. We use AAC devices. We use all these incredible tools to give kids the capacity and people the capacity to engage within a society and be productive. It is so good to hear that we're looking at that in a broader context for education, because that it's absolutely critical. The other idea that I think you talked about and everybody else has talked about is collaboration. And yesterday we heard how co-teaching helps people to collaborate in ways and share ideas in classrooms. And I wish we would see more and more of that. And just to take the step back, our students have tremendous needs, and the needs that you have identified for your kids in the UK. I've spoken to teacher after teacher here who really spoke about the challenges of accessing their kids through the internet, through technology, and then connecting with those parents. So that thread is very strong, and it's connecting so many different people with so many different issues, that as we bring it to the forefront and in our consciousness, we will be able to address it in ways that we've never addressed it before. So thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciated it.
Thank you, Sonia.
Forward to the document.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say that universal design, as much as it stems from special education, we're now realizing and opening ourselves to the reality that we all have certain preferences, not necessarily needs, preferences, and that we can all benefit from those things. And with the rise of neurodiversity movement, there is need for universal design across the spectrum that we have, no matter what, how we call it or how we identify. So it's really valuable, and I'm so happy to see that it was mentioned so many times before. I'm just I was looking at different presentations and just kind of making connections to what I'm about to say. So I apologize if I haven't mentioned everyone, but Valentina last night and Maria, they were both super good with what they were presenting. So I think we're all going to collaborate really well. Let's not waste any more time for Amber.
Yes, let's not lose our connection, and yes, keep together. And yes, we are all in this together. And you see, there are so many positive reactions to your presentation. Illuminated your presentation, great work, amazing, insightful, and thank you very much. And it was really amazing. Thank you. And
thank you, Ludmila, for inviting me. Thank you for inviting me. That was really, really nice.
Always. Yeah, always. I follow your work on Twitter, and unfortunately we didn't have a chance to meet again at the media conference where we got acquainted. And I remember your amazing presentation on augmented reality, and it's Sarah is an expert in that, and it's really, if you want to know,
you're all invited to see it in practice in the UK, and Liverpool is a great musical city, so feel free. The tour is going to be available.
That's wonderful.
As soon as COVID allows for travel.
That's right. And our next presentation is with Amber Chandler, and it's wonderful that there is connection, and I feel that Amber, so the floor is yours, but who is presenting, who is introducing Amber?
I am. I'm just trying to make sure I know. Next we have Amber Chandler. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. And Dr. Smirnova, I need recording rights. And
Okay, again, all right.
yeah.
You're losing them all the time. Okay, all right, you're all set. And Amber, you can pull up your presentation so you have your rights.
I'm trying to. I don't know if I can.
Okay.
I can. Let's see. There we go.
Okay, good.
There we go. All right, are we ready to begin? Okay, hi everybody. I'm Amber Chandler. I'm very excited to be here. I am presenting the case for caring classrooms, and the understanding is obviously we all want caring classrooms, but the case that I'm making is that that's the first priority instead of the 20th priority. This is the first priority, is the case for a caring classroom. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I am an 8th grade ELA teacher. I currently am teaching a pretty selectively diverse group of kids, I guess you would say. I teach 118 students. I have 28 special ed students. I have another 7 or 8 with 504s. And I have another 6 or 7 who have this year began identifying as trans students. And all of this happened, sort of coming out of the pandemic with this huge level of emotional need for students. And we've always had emotional need. And that's my sort of specialty. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm in the trenches of this. This is everything I'm talking about happened Friday. So this is very much action research in the fact that what I'm talking about are experiences that are right now. I am outside of Buffalo, New York, in a little town called Hamburg. I'm the author of 2 books. The first one is called The Flexible ELA Classroom, and it was written out of a desire to differentiate for all my students and trying to come up with ways that I could meet their academic needs, given that the structure of the school that I am in, and most schools nearby, is really integrated co-teaching. So everybody, I have a co-teacher for 2 of my classes where my special ed students are, but the fact is that I need to be able to reach every kid in every room every time. And so flexibility was sort of the thing that I approached this with. The second book that I wrote actually happened almost immediately after the first, and that was, it's called The Flexible SEL, Social Emotional Learning Classroom, because I realized after the first book that really I needed to say a whole bunch of other things about how we treat students, the emotional and social concerns, before we can get to their academic concerns. So it ends up kind of feeling like a prequel to the first one. And so in writing both of those books, I really studied my own students with both the practitioner's eye, but also as sort of a researcher and looking at a lot of data about how they were performing with different tasks. So I am an author, but I am a mom to teenagers. My own son is in 8th grade in my building, not on my team, but he is in my building. And he is struggling tremendously coming out of the pandemic, as so many other students are. He was home virtual all last year and then left halfway through his 6th grade year. So here's a kid who started this pandemic, and all of the 8th graders I have are in the situation. They started off as preteens, they were, and now they're all in the horrible problems that come with adolescence, publicly back in with their peers for the first time in a long time, and all of the challenges that brings. I'm a huge student advocate. I'm the person who, if somebody needs a person to come to a meeting to just lay down the facts about the students and what the students need, they get me, and they'll make sure that I'm there as an advocate. because so many times, and this is you're going to hear throughout my presentation, equity is the great divide. And my own child, because I know a lot and I'm a teacher and I've tenured and I've been here a long time, gets what my kid needs. But then the kid whose parents don't understand how the education system works, they don't always have people advocating for them. And so you'll hear me talk a lot about equity and how do we make sure that we advocate for all students all the time. My Twitter, this is my Twitter handle and my email address and my website. A couple of just opinions about how this will work best for all of you is that I'm going to talk, but I really want you to think of me as sort of facilitating another conversation that you're actively involved in. So please feel free to like chat. I do a lot of webinars and it makes me happy when the chat is like blowing up with conversation, because that means what I'm saying is resonating with you. And what you take from this is coming from our collective shared knowledge. And so I know some people think like, should I be chatting while she's talking? Yes, please chat and please talk to each other and kind of build that momentum from the ideas that I have and build that momentum together. Also, I know some people mentioned, I know Sarah mentioned being really active on Twitter. I'm really active on Twitter. One of the best things you can do for the cause, if you want to look at like what we're doing as a cause, is to fill Twitter with conversation about the topic. And, you know, so many times when I'm presenting, I'll tell people like, look, we should be tweeting about this. Like, see whose attention we can get, you know, see why is everybody talking about inclusion? Why is everybody talking about, fidelity to learning? Like, why is everybody talking about learning by design? And that's exciting. So feel free to jump in. Again, my Twitter handle is up here as well. So it's the value of the collective conversation that I'm hoping happens during my presentation. So I'm just facilitating, I think, a conversation that will help us frame things in a way that's helpful to the conversation. So the first thing I want to talk about is just like the pandemic snapshot from where I am in outside of Buffalo, New York, like kind of what happened here and to us. And what that did, and this quote kind of sums it up. It says, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated a lot of problems facing public schools, but it didn't create most of them. Most of the inequities existed long before the pandemic. The only difference is who was affected and who is paying attention. This to me, like when I saw that quote, like just like struck me, because I haven't given homework in a decade. I don't give homework because I don't think that my students all have access to the same internet connections. They don't have access to the same, it's lovely if your mom or dad or grandma or extended family can sit at the table with you and do homework. But that child has a much better success rate than a child who doesn't have a quiet space, has responsibilities, may have a job, may have siblings to take care of, may not have, equal access to all of the things that are necessary. So to me, when I saw this quote, I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. Like it's not been equal for a very long time. And it hasn't been equitable for people at home. And homework is one of my big pet peeves. I assure you, it makes people either love me or not. But I really think that we're ignoring the fact that what students are able to accomplish at home is directly related to the home they are going to. And to grade them and assess them on their resources isn't grading them on their knowledge. And that's why I just don't do it. And this is sort of where I was 6-7 years ago when I wrote the first book. I was like, I got to say these things. And not to say that no one listened, but there wasn't like the world didn't stop when they heard this, thought that I had about equity. But what happened with the pandemic is suddenly what I've really cared about for a while is actually in the forefront. And I'm super excited to talk about it. I just want to make sure that we capture the moment and make good decisions around that moment so that we are not stuck later on going back to normal, because going back to normal is not a good plan. And so that's kind of what my presentation is going to be about, is the pandemic shone this light and highlighted problems that a lot of people have had for a very long time, but just made excuses and didn't tell people because they were embarrassed and they didn't do anything about it. And now the pandemic has brought it into the light, which is good, but I just don't want it to go like recede away as the pandemic, like as we take masks off, do we go back to like hiding what was inequitable before? And that's my hope, is that that's not what we do. What the pandemic highlighted, for me, these were the big ones, was the failure of standardized testing data to be used for school improvement. Where I live, New York State is extremely test heavy state. You have to have what are called Regents exams to graduate from high school. So you could take all your classes, you could get good grades, but if you do not pass your Regents, you will not graduate high school. So these are expensive tests, and they're, take up a lot of time. There's a lot of preparation, and I'm not against the testing. That's not at all. I'm not against testing. What I am against and what I am concerned for is how we use the data to improve schools. Do we get teachers together and look at questions and say, there's something maybe flawed about this question, and that's why 80% of the kids miss this? Or are we looking at a question and thinking, oh, we didn't explain it that way? I'll give you a perfect example. My students, and I teach 8th grade, had this one question years ago that they did not do well on at all. And I got together with my other 8th grade teachers, and we were talking it through. And the question said to compare something. And somehow in 8th grade's brain, they were not thinking that that meant compare and contrast. Well, the definition of comparing is to compare and contrast. So what was happening is the state rubric was saying that students had to have one thing that was the same and one thing that was different. But our students didn't know that, because in all of our design of our materials, we were trying to help them. We would say compare and contrast. So they were thinking that compare and contrast meant compare are the same, contrast is different. So they weren't able to like understand what the question was actually asking. And it was because of how we, as the classroom teachers, were designing our assessments. So there's a lot of really good ways to use testing data to improve instruction. I do not think that happens very much. And I think the worst part about it is standardized testing during the pandemic. A lot of it came to be like just computer programs, take this test at home, take this practice. And then, they didn't have the same learning environments. They didn't have the same past instruction. So one of the things the pandemic highlighted is there's a lot of data about kids, but what that translates into, how do we help them, is really different. And so I think that was one thing. Inequalities in access to devices, but this was, as Sarah mentioned, and broadband, and the ability to actually all be on a device at the same time. There was a time during the pandemic that my husband he's a PR guy. So basically he does like marketing and things. So he does a lot of like video things. So he was trying to work from home. I was trying to teach from home, and both my kids were trying to learn from home. And we could all go to different rooms in the house, but one of us always had internet access problems because we had too much happening due to the broadband. And in fact, we never could, like we contacted our cable company, we could never actually get all of us to function at the same time based on where we live and the broadband that was available. And I thought, how many other people is this happening to? And sort of how are they handling this? The necessity to restructure educational priorities. This to me became just like such an eyesore during the pandemic about what are we prioritizing. And I talk a lot about in my writing and my other webinars, I talk a lot about the difference between compliance and engagement. When you're in a classroom, you can look like you're doing a really good job because everybody looks like they're on task and they're all sitting in their seats and they're all doing what they're supposed to do, but that's compliance, that's not engagement. And so the pandemic for me highlighted, all right, look, I'm going to be on this Zoom call. I need to do some things to engage these students, or they're going to just be on a different screen, or they're going to switch, they're going to play games. So it really, for me, highlighted everything. I mean, very small amounts of my class need to be direct instruction. I mean, for 8th graders, we need to have, when I was doing Zoom meetings, we were polling, we were doing stand up, sit down, we were doing breakout rooms, all the things. It was so active that I enjoyed that piece of it. And I realized that there's a temptation in the like actual real school classroom to like get through a list and like get your lesson done. And it becomes much more about you than it is about engagement. So that to me, it really highlighted restructuring the educational priorities to use some of the tools, the digital tools. One of the great things I found, it was sort of a random experience, but how much more grammar drill my students needed than I actually was giving them. We ended up using Edpuzzle, which I love because you can check to see how much students are watching. Oh, I mean, it's a good check. It's a good like nanny kind of version of, are they doing the work? But what happened is my students, my co-teacher and I, we did the same unit we've always done. And as we went through the unit, we were assigning a lot of Edpuzzles because they were home, and we were trying. My students did better during the pandemic because I used Edpuzzle to teach grammar than me teaching grammar. Because I could measure individual engagement and I could assign interventions to specific kids, and the kids who were ready to move on to the next thing, the tools that I found were so helpful. And some like Look It and Kahoot and like the really engaging kind of games used appropriately create a very, and everybody knows this when you walk by my room, it kind of creates like a party like atmosphere of, people are clapping and they're excited and they're, we did, it's called Look It, to review for what are complete sentences. And it was highly competitive and really fun. So this gamification, if you're walking through a classroom and you think, as if you're an administrator, or you're walking through as a visitor and everybody's just like heads down working, that doesn't mean they're engaged. So that's a way to look at this again, is maybe restructure some of the priorities so that engagement is one of the bigger emphasis than necessarily compliance. And then the fourth thing for me was the absolutely crucial role of schools for mental and physical health interventions. Students' access to having a caring adult to talk to was severely limited during the pandemic. They couldn't get to their own therapist if they had them. They had to do calls. My own son pretty much really didn't want to do a Zoom call with anybody about mental health issues. They're weird. It's hard to do, and you lose a lot of the like caring adult feel when you're trying to talk over a Zoom call, which you've already been on for 6 hours a day. And so these students who are always trying to go to the nurse and they're always trying to go to the guidance counselor, to me, that's a good sign that our schools are working. Our schools are working as a hub and central place for students to find the help they need. And so those are some of the highlights of the pandemic that I noticed. But then I come to the now what? I don't want things to go back to the way they were. We have to really seize this moment to radically reject the past instead of returning to normal. Normal was a lot of compliance and a lot of data collection that didn't go anywhere. I think that the fact is when I talked about social emotional learning, 6-7 years ago, people wanted to pat me on the head as she's like a cute girl and that's really nice. You should have been a school psychologist. I'm a hippie. That was sort of the reaction. And then suddenly now, and then just in one simple fact, my SEL book, I just did a second edition of it because now the publisher thinks wait a minute, people are going to listen to this time around. So that's exciting for me. Is it okay, I've been saying this, but now's the time we do this. And we do it in a bigger level. So as tempting as it is to just want to feel normal again, is that what we want for our students is normal? And I would argue no, that we don't want normal. We want caring classrooms. So the case I'm going to make in the presentation is about what the basic tenets of a caring classroom looks like. And these are based on my experiences. I've been teaching for 23 years. I have been a parent for 16. And I started teaching high school. I taught for 4 years in high school. Then I moved to a new state, and my husband made me go on interviews for practice. And then I happened to get a middle school position and fell there and ended up loving middle school, ended up staying in middle school. I also hated middle school when I went there. So I almost every teacher's oh yeah, worst years of your life. It kind of is, but at the same time, being the adult who understands that is helpful. I had a pilot program for at-risk students at the high school, and I'm hoping that next year I'll have a pilot program for at-risk 7th graders to help them do some interventions before they go to the high school. So we have them for 7th and 8th grade, just some interventions. So basically the three tenets of what I'm going to talk about and how I think we need to create caring classrooms and really change the narrative about school post-pandemic. One is that it is student-centered. It is, you know, and this is a very old dated phrase, but like the sage on the stage is gone. that sage on the stage is gone because all the students actually have Google in their pockets. Like, I remember when I was in school and a teacher would tell me some news or information that I'd never heard before, and some like amazing fact, and I was just enthralled by it. My own kids both can find anything they want to know online. Like, if they want to know the information factually, they can find it. And they actually have the tools to find it. And most kids do know how to find things online that they want to know. With my son, when he was in 5th grade, my washer broke and we were like getting ready to like throw it out the front door. Basically, we were done and irritated. And he's like, can I try to fix it? And we're like, oh, whatever, sure, you can try to fix it. Well, he watched like 4 tutorials on how to fix our washer, and he fixed our washer in 5th grade. And it's embarrassing how little we know about it and like how we didn't do anything. We were just like going to throw it away. We just didn't know what to do. So the fact of the matter was that that's kind of a point where there's a generation of kids who, if they want to learn something, they know how to go learn it. And there's lots of tutorials and there's lots of YouTube videos and there's so much out there, and a lot of it is junk, but a lot of it is actually really helpful. And the kids know that. So we have to look at Caring Classroom as like, what do students want to know? And it's not that we don't meet the standards, but it's that we look at how we can look at what they want to do and how we can incorporate standards instead of how can we just do the standards? You know, how can we just do what we want with our agenda? Because we need to work with what they want to know. Hugely important part of Caring Classrooms are partnered with families and communities, because I don't know about the rest of the world represented here, but we had students who just disappeared during the pandemic. They were gone. Like, we couldn't contact them. We didn't get a hold of them. We tried parents, we tried calls, we tried visits. Students just stopped really going to school. And it was hard to trace them down, and eventually we'd catch up with them. And what we'd find is that their parents were maybe, you know, essential workers at a hospital, and they were there 12 hours a day, and their kids were alone, and their kids didn't have broadband. And the list went on. And so we really have to be partners with families and communities all of the time. But I think post-pandemic, we need to really embrace that. And the third one is probably the one that's the most radical, is that teachers are facilitators who co-construct learning with students. And it's almost like what I was saying about this presentation. I'm here to give you some information that I have based on my experiences, but the breadth of knowledge of the collective group of people who are here is far greater than anything I could tell you. So if what I can tell you can spark something that begins a conversation in a chat where real learning takes place and real connections are made, that co-construction of knowledge and learning is far more relevant than if I told all of you that like you needed to like, you know, take notes the whole time and hand in your notes at the end. Like, that's not helpful to anyone. And so this is sort of a philosophy that makes people a little bit uncomfortable, because teachers, and I'm the bossiest of them all, we all kind of have this like boss mentality that like, this is our show, this is our thing, I've got to do this, I have this agenda. But if we can look at that a little more flexibly, and I'm going to give you some examples and talk about how to do that and how I've been doing that. But it really is, these are challenging thoughts. Like, to say that we want a caring classroom isn't simple. It sounds like a no-brainer. Well, of course I want a caring classroom. And then my next question is always like, I know you want to care for students, but do you want like the whole classroom to be caring, meaning that they care for each other too and their whole community? And that's a different set of issues. So the student-centered part, what does that mean actually in practice? In practice, and I've mentioned this already, is that engagement versus compliance. Compliance is lovely when it's happening, but it doesn't mean anyone's learning anything. It just means that you have good classroom management. I'm learning, and as the time goes on Friday, I was talking about this, we were playing Book It, and at the end, someone, like the way you play, it kind of allows this moment where somebody can sneak in at the end and win. My class like erupted, like this person had been like kind of sitting there like playing and doing fine, but at the end won the game. And it erupted. It was so loud. And the rule in my classes is if I clap, you have to clap back. Like that's what you do. And I clapped and then they clapped back, but they kept going. And then I clapped again and I'm like, okay, like clap back. We've got to stop here. And, and I realized, and I looked around, I'm like, this is the best thing that could possibly happen. Like, it doesn't feel safe as the teacher that like everybody's so excited about something, but what more could you ask for? Is people who want to still talk about the look-at that they were doing on sentences and grammar. So compliance would be the worksheets that they were sitting filling out, but the engagement is the excitement, and the engagement is messy. Engagement is different. We need to be humanistic versus punitive. I recently gave an entire webinar about why we should quit deficit analysis of students. We should quit with the like trying to getchas, the cauchas, your mom didn't sign this, you forgot to put a comma in that place, you used the comma wrong, so I'm going to mark it wrong 37 times and you'll fail the paper. That's not, it sounds like really archaic that would happen, but it happens all the time in both school, middle school, high school, but college as well, where a person will fail a paper because of sort of a gotcha moment versus what was actually learned. So being humanistic in an approach is more important. That plays into doing a lot more with asset versus deficit analysis of students. Meaning by that I use 1-point rubrics. It's right down the middle. This is what you're supposed to do. And if you're not doing it, I make some notes on the left-hand side. This is how you can get to what you're supposed to do. If you're above and beyond and like you're just way above, I give you suggestions of what else you can learn on the right-hand side. So I'm look at this is what you have to do. How are you doing on that list? And going that way instead of you are a 72 and you are 100 plus. Like that's not helpful to anybody. Feedback is what's helpful to people. Multiple measures versus a single point in time. That high stakes kind of testing. I tell people all the time, we're professionals. If a student, and right now in my district, we have sort of like this, we have some kids who have COVID, we have kids who are quarantining. You're a professional. You can decide to just exempt something that you did as a warm up in your class. Like you don't have to overload students. There's no single moment in time that should define the grade. It should be all of the activities that students do instead of some single point in time. Differentiated instruction versus one size fits all. This is really the topic of my first book, which is really how can we use choice boards? How can we use strategic groupings to help students learn? How can we, I'm a big proponent and have given a lot of webinars and written a lot about project-based learning, where project-based learning allows for students to actually like care about what they're learning by looking at their passions and giving them choice. One size fits all, I guess really what came down to is I had 118 students that I couldn't figure out 2 of them that seemed the same. I needed to really look at how can I approach all of them and give them all a good chance of success. Which then again, like I said, led me to my other side, which is differentiated social emotional learning approaches versus assumed competencies. A lot of times as educators, we assume a competency in something that students absolutely cannot do. I said, I use this example in my book. I was walking through the hallway and this boy bumped into me and I said, pardon me. And he didn't say anything. He just kept going and just looked at me kind of weird. And we had a conversation later. I said, why didn't you respond? Like, why didn't you say anything? And he's like, I was trying to figure out what you said. He had never heard anyone say, pardon me before. And he didn't know what I meant. And I said, well, what should you have done in that situation? You seemed really rude. And he said, I was really late and I was stressed. And like, I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. And I just bumped into a teacher who said something I didn't know what it meant. So I just ran. And I was like, okay, that makes sense what you did. And we talked about like, we need to make sure that we're not assuming competencies in all kinds of scenarios that occur in school. Particularly now, I will say my 8th graders seem like 6th graders in terms of their abilities to just do the normal things. Like put a heading on a paper. I had to literally teach my students how to put a heading on a paper. And I couldn't believe that was a conversation until I realized, well, the last time they had a full school year, they were in 5th grade. They had about half of sixth grade. Maybe in sixth grade, they hadn't gotten to a formal paper with a header yet, where normally, that's not something I have to teach eighth graders. So assuming competencies right now, both academic and social emotional, we have to look at it differently. We have to really look at this as sort of a student-centered approach where we actually find out what they need and meet them there. And that's what we should always do. And that's kind of what I've said about this idea of caring classrooms. These are not like ideas that are so radical. It's just ideas that the time has come we can fix. Like it's a moment where when I say to my administrators, hey, we're working on these social emotional factors right now. No one is thinking that it's just me and that's a cute idea, or I'm glad you care about them. Like that's not what's happening. Educators and administrators and people are starting to see that this has always had a value, and now we can seize on these things to change things in our own classrooms in a way that's acceptable. So the student-centered is really important, but like I mentioned, the partnerships is equally important. This one's a big one in a couple ways. Families in decision-making. Families, and I will tell you from my own experience, I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. Families feel incredibly divided about school, incredibly uncomfortable with school, because every teacher has now adapted in some different way than maybe they had, we all expected teachers' classrooms to be. I know, for example, on the team I teach with, I'm the only person who accepts late work. The other 4 teachers do not accept late work. They just don't, and they don't have to. So if families don't know these sorts of things, then kids, and the kids all know, but if the families don't understand, then maybe they will think that they're allowed to hand in something late to the math teacher or to the science teacher. And it's their prerogative. I don't agree with it, but they can do what they want. But including families in understanding that, like letting them know what the way things, and I always say, the way we do things in 255, my room, are a little different, and here's how that is. But letting families know that, but also including families in decision making. I just had a little girl. She struggled all quarter, like really, really struggled. She was absent a lot. She had a lot of social emotional issues, and she owed me. We had a slideshow to do, and then a presentation, and that was. They were both big grades, and she was crying. She was with me, and she's like, I cannot do this. And I told her, let's just take one, eat the elephant one bite at a time. Like, let's look, this is like, you have this giant task to do. Just do slideshow, just create the slideshow. And she spent like all day on a weekend. She's sending me messages. She's showing me, and it's really good. And she did more work probably that Saturday than she did all the rest of the quarter, but she was hanging in there. And when I graded her slideshow, it put her to like maybe a 70 for her average. And I sent her mom a message and said, look, I am completely willing, if you don't care, I'm willing to just exempt this presentation right now. The girl is like, she's worked herself silly. She's having a nervous breakdown about presenting in front of the class. This is more work than she's ever shown all this quarter. We start a new quarter Monday. So this was this week. I'm like, I want her to have like a fresh, clean slate, and we'll hold her to her presentation next quarter. We'll have lots of other presentations. I'm willing to exempt this and have a conversation with her and tell her I appreciate her hard work. And the mom like immediately said, she's like, oh my God, you don't know how helpful that is. She's not sleeping. She's so upset. Our whole family has been this like torn apart by this, trying to make her do this. And she said, she's like, you showed her that you cared about her and you really wanted her to do the slideshow and get some success. She's like, next time we'll all come together when it's time for the presentation, and we'll all work with her, me and you and her dad and her older sister, and we'll make sure she gets the slideshow in. And including this mom, this girl's going to get a 70 on her report card. Like, she's not lighting the world on fire in middle school, but she's going to try now. I've shown her that I'm willing to fight for her. And when I talked to her, I pulled her aside and I said, look, we are starting new things. And you trying to tread water in this old quarter, like grades are due. So like, I've got to put your grades in now, and this is what I'm willing to do. And she promised me, she said, I will do the next presentation. I promise you, I will do it. I'll have it to you early. I'll stay after school. So just having some humanity in the conversation. And we have the professional decision-making capability. And I sent the email to the mom, and I CC'd my principal. And so he knew what I was doing. This is not she's escaping everything she ever has to do. She knows she has to do the next presentation or she'll get a 0, just like everybody else. But having some humanity, if you think about, like, let's say if it was one of us, let's say as a teacher, one of us was having just such a huge struggle that we were incapable of doing something. We shouldn't be fired and never teach again. Like, a little grace goes a long way. And that's a lot of what working with families has taught me, is that families need grace right now. And once I talked to her more and knew more about her story and what was going on, her parents were getting divorced. She's in 2 different houses. One of them doesn't have the internet, on and on and on and on. Everybody has a story. And if we can help students by giving them grace and seeing them as human beings and making those, and I know Sarah mentioned this, like, we have to have relationships. If we have a relationship with someone, they're willing to work with us and we can work with them, but it starts with that family relationship as well. Communities, exploring all the options for services, making sure we know how to connect families. I just connected a woman with a doctor who is really good at kind of going through the diagnosis of ADHD, because, she's very thorough, and the mom wanted to make sure that this is what she was doing. So giving as many possibilities as connecting families and communities, but also not forgetting the students, because we need to partner with students. And that's really what I did. And I will tell, and this, if this ever comes up, and it has come up before, where someone will say to me, that's not fair that you let her not do this assignment. Well, she wasn't going to do it anyway, probably. So me working with her and creating this future plan for how she's going to handle that task is more effective than her giving up. And I have to trust my professional judgment of 23 years of teaching, that when students know I believe in them, know that I will work with them, know that I will give them the resources that they need, they do what they need to do. And it's only when they are working in this like silo of like panic that they really can't complete the work. And so, is it fair? I would do the same thing for anybody else's kid. And I tell parents that, because parents occasionally will say, well, I heard so-and-so. And I would say, well, I can't talk to you about an individual student, but please know that if your child is ever in a crisis, have your child reach out to me and we will work together. And that kind of is the answer for everybody. Like, if your child is in a crisis, I will work with your child. And then everybody starts thinking of everything as a community in my classroom, instead of pointing fingers of this person did this or this person did that. And so people are very supportive. Kids know, like, but it isn't just kids who like I exempt or change something. Kids know when kids just don't show up on presentation days. They notice, they know so-and-so never did that presentation. They know that, but what they like to see and what they then help with as a community is what happens when we all come together and really help someone who's very nervous about a presentation. And that's when the community happens. And that's when a caring classroom happens, is when everybody is able to kind of convene around a child and help them in a non-judgmental way. Because I point out to kids all the time, like, you've all been there. Everybody struggles. Like, we've got to be a community. So facilitating learning that is co-constructed with learners to create this caring community is based really on these things. And this is just my experience. The biggest one being choice. If I can give a choice, I give a choice, period. Like, doesn't matter. I mean, it even doesn't matter what it is. If it's, do this worksheet or this worksheet, pick one. A lot of what I do is I ask students to help me create things. And they know a lot of the digital tools they can create. Like, students can create a Kahoot, they can create a Quizlet, they can create a Blooket, they can create these different activities. And I'll tell them, like, oh, if you want to do some Blookets, why don't you make me a few? And they'll make Blookets. Like, they are co-creating with me and co-constructing their learning. So choice is always first and foremost the most important thing to me. But project-based learning is sort of my baby. Project-based learning was my solution to teaching in an integrated classroom. because what I was finding is that I was teaching to like the low middle to make sure everybody could get it done. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to teach this assignment and everybody here like has to be able to do it. So the kids who are the highest kids were bored witless and the lowest kids still couldn't do it. So what I really kind of came to was, let's do project-based learning where there's lots of choice involved. There's lots of guidance involved every step of the way. You know, I've had students, for example, and they're all doing a project, but I had a student who did how to choose a dog for your family. That was their project. This is 8th grade. That's a pretty low level topic, but we did the same steps, researched it, talked to experts, knew they were going to have to make a presentation and share it. That was their emphasis, right? So they were doing this, like how to choose a dog for your family. Big deal to this kid. Had every chance of being successful. Really, really, really smart kid who was like way smarter than me, wanted to talk about how to create an aqueduct system to improve like the environment under certain cities. To be honest with you, I didn't understand a ton of what he did because it was beyond brilliant, like on that side. Both of those students had equal access at learning. They both did research. They both had some sort of note-taking system. They both created a slideshow. They both presented to the class. And the beauty of this sort of co-construction of choice and facilitated learning is no one looked at the kid who created the aqueduct one as like, oh, that's an A. And they didn't look at the one that was about dogs and say, oh, that's like a D or an F, because they weren't. They were just on their choice level and learning level of the students, but my goals were accomplished. I wanted them to do research and create a slideshow and present to an authentic audience. So it can be very different. Retakes, revisions, and redemption. Nothing's ever over in my class until I have to submit grades. If you didn't do well, honestly, this is like, to me, I tell kids, this is the beauty of the internet altogether. If you did not do well on your, you know, is the thing we're focusing on now is commas with coordinating conjunctions. So not the most thrilling thing, but very necessary. So if you didn't get it right the first time, I can find on the internet thousands of practices for you, and I will send you, and you will do some practice, and you'll come back, and then I'll give you another quiz, not the same one, another one, but just like it, and I'll give you the grade you get. So I don't average them together because you learn at a different pace does not mean you are penalized for that. You don't need to be penalized. You just needed to study, and you didn't know how. So once I show them how to do this, they can do retakes, revisions. They can get redemption. They can save themselves, because one moment should not define your whole quarter in a classroom. So if you did horribly on a test because you had to put your dog down that morning, like that is not a defining moment in my class about the test. Like that's not it. We'll figure out a way for you to take the test, but everything is not do or die in my classroom, as my classroom is not the most important thing. Their worlds that we have to like encompass all of it are the most important things. We do a passion project at the end where they design and research. That was what I kind of mentioned before. Technology integration are things I really, really want students to be able to use technology. I've been a paperless classroom for 7 years now, which is interesting because I started this school year and we did not touch a computer for a month. I wanted my students to detox from all the things they were nervous about. We made posters and played games and board games. We did a whole bunch of other things. But that technology integration piece is something that they really need to know how to do and be able to learn with. My time is, and it's funny, I usually leave the chat up on the side so I can see, but I was worried I might get distracted. So I'm really excited to kind of delve into any questions and comments. I really love to hear what you guys were chatting about. My books are available on Amazon, or this is my editor, if you're interested in the updated SEL book, she can do like bulk orders for like school districts and stuff. And then my email is here if you want to reach out to me. Twitter is honestly, the only people I follow on Twitter are educators. So to me, it's like this happy place of education. Like I don't follow like any famous people or anything, like unless they're famous educators. So Twitter, reach out to me if you have any questions and comments, but I would love to actually see what everybody was talking about and how we are doing, and kind of take a look. I'm just going to skim through. Anybody want to jump in?
While you are looking at the chat, I just wanted to take a moment to summarize a few things, or to synthesize, actually. So far, we've heard from researchers, we've heard from college practitioners, now we've heard from a classroom practitioner who's looking at things in very similar ways. There was something that you said that struck me about the trauma that kids are experiencing now, and how school systems need to look at this as a whole. And it dawned on me, having come from a school district perspective, is that trauma did not start with the pandemic. If we think about and I'm talking specifically United States, I don't know how people are dealing with it in other countries, but if I say to you, Columbine, I say to you, Sandy Hook, I say to you, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, all of those evoke incredible, horrific situations, and how that is translated into our classrooms has to do with what we're doing in schools every month. We used to have fire drills. We still have fire drills, but now we have intruder drills. Now we have drills for gunmen. Teachers are looking for places in their rooms. They're putting up screens on their doors. All of those things that every time we do a drill is traumatic for our children. So the way school must deal with it is by including caring classrooms at all levels, social emotional learning at all levels, programs that reach kids from pre-K all the way to high school. And many schools are doing that. We need to address the ability to deal with the things that are realities in our environment, and take away the fear and the trauma, and deal with the practical reactions that we need to employ at the time. So we are in a time where we need to look at children as all children being special. We talk about special education. All kids are special. All of our teachers are special. We need to address it in that way. So thank you for bringing that concept forward and talking about it as a practical classroom teacher.
Thank you. One of the things I was thinking about, is how, teachers have always taken care of students in these certain ways, but I think the numbers have grown who need a much bigger support system. And, I in years past, I could name 5, 6 kids who really need a caring adult to put some time in with that student. And you could, send those names to guidance, and that's not the case anymore. I can hardly name 5 or 10 who don't need an extra layer of support. And so that's why for me, SEL and incorporating it into what you do already in your classroom, there's just not more time. There's not more time to add something else. So it's almost like how you can incorporate care into every decision you're making, and how you can look at things more humanely, less punitively. And for me, I really try to look at my professional judgment. And I don't think teachers are often encouraged to look at people's professional judgment, their own, I'm not making this happen for this kid. It's not necessary. I have 3 students who are hospitalized right now who are in a mental health facility. And I am not sending them pages of grammar review. I have said, we will take care of grammar later. Let's find a book. I've emailed the kids, find a book that you want to read. Here are some suggestions. Email me back and forth. That's what we're going to do, because I don't see the point of some other things. And I do have that professional judgment. In every other profession, we trust doctors to have professional judgment. We trust a veterinarian to have a professional judgment. But somehow as teachers, we look around who's going to say if this is okay or not. We have to kind of own that and say, no, I said it's okay. I know kids, I know my classroom, and I know what we need to learn. So I really encourage people to use their professional judgment, and to, and I always say, I'm look, if you're on the side of the kid and you're advocating for them and you're always looking out for their best interests, it's going to be really hard to argue with that. And that kind of puts people at ease. But I really do encourage teachers everywhere to, be the advocates for their students and then teach them to be advocates for themselves.
Wonderful. And it's interesting, Amber, you were not here for the morning keynote speaker. And Dr. Ramesh Sharma was really focusing on the concepts of humanizing education and looking at children and learners not like at objects, but as subjects, make them active, make them center of our classroom. So, and you gave perfect examples how you treat your students, how you approach those challenges and issues. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. And it's interesting. And our further sessions would be also adding to this central. I think it's a central message during this conference, humanizing education, and that's how we have to move forward. Fantastic. Let's look at the questions, and there were a lot of comments, and people were, our attendees were supporting and really looking at your classroom, your examples, and finding similar situations in their own classrooms.
Yeah, I looked through to see if there's any questions, and I think it was more comments, which is good. Which is good. They were in support of the thoughts. But one of the things that I think that people mentioned was teaching students to advocate for themselves is really hard, because it has to come from a place of confidence that a lot of students don't have yet. So building their confidence in your own classroom community and then helping them learn to use it in other spaces is really important. It is but again, I also think I'm the president of our teachers union. The number of people who come to me and they're like, Amber, can you, and they're like, tell me something they want me to do that really they should do for themselves. And most of the time I'm trying to say to them, I'm like, well, I really think that should come from you, and kind of saying it that way. But it's teachers in the same boat. Like they don't feel confident to advocate for something. And, I always tell people, I'm like, you never know until you ask, that kind of thing. And I'm like, there's nothing bad. There's nothing wrong with that question. But it's amazing how many people don't advocate. Adults don't advocate for what we need. And I think that that's also something that's kind of came up in the pandemic is advocating has become adversarial in some scenarios. And so people are all a little nervous. Social media has led to like this, we need this, we want this. And it kind of has this real nasty attitude around it sometimes. So I think people are a little nervous about how to advocate. In my first book, I talk about registers and teaching students how to ask for something in a way that is empowering versus makes them feel insecure. The number of students who would walk up to me and say, hey, Mrs. Chandler, I need a pencil. And my immediate reaction is like, not good. Like, I don't like that you just like told me what your needs were and dropped them in my lap. And, suddenly it became my need and I'm in the middle of teaching. And instead I talked to them, I'm like, we've got to figure out a way to do this. But if a student comes up to me and says, Mrs. Chandler, I'm really sorry, I have a problem. I don't know if you can help me or not, but can I borrow a pencil? I'm like, oh, you're such a nice kid. Here's a pencil. Like it really changes when people approach it differently. We work on registers and how to do that. We work on how to advocate for yourself by the way you carry yourself. And we talk about when students are late. The number of students who are late who come in and they're like, I'm here, like they disrupt your whole entire class and they're late and they're attention seeking and all this. And I explain, I'm like, I don't really pay that much attention to you if you're late for like, I'm not really like, it's not hinging on whether you got here or not. But if you come in that way, I'm like, you know what you do? And when I act it out for the kids and I show them and they think it's funny, but then they do it. I'm like, you walk in and you're like, and then you sit down. And then after class, you're like, I'm really sorry I was late. Like, that's it. And then they're like, well, you won't be mad? And I was like, no. I'm not mad that you were in the bathroom, or I'm not mad why ever you were late. I'm mad that you come running to my classroom and make a scene. And I think that a lot of times kids just don't know. And that's where we have to spend that time, like advocating for them and like figuring out ways to help them learn how to communicate. And so that advocating piece, a lot of times is like in the classroom in action.
I think you just answered a question that is in the chat, which said, are there strategies a teacher can use to make a child more comfortable advocating? And you just answered that question.
A lot of it involves you being ridiculous, like being very silly yourself. A lot of it is me being silly and saying like, this is how you do this. And then, kind of make a joke out of it, but they do learn.
And they practice. Yeah. So thank you very much for sharing that insight with us, all those insights with us.
Yeah, and now we have a little bit of time for stretching a little bit, because yesterday we had a break, and today we have, let me share the screen. We have sessions right after this presentation. We have 2 rounds of sessions, and so thank you again, Amber and Mrs. Chandler. These are our presenters for the second round sessions would be Dr. Anselin, Yulia Ovchinnikova, and our own Dr. Joshua Patterson. And in the last session, we have again Dr. Joshua Patterson will continue and finish his workshop. And then we will have Mauricio and Santiago Lopez and Heather Van Mullen. They will finish our sessions today. And we would like at the end everybody to come back for closing. We have now a few announcements and maybe surprises. Okay, so I created rooms. So you have 2 minutes to move to the room. So again, stretch. Right.
Get something to eat and come on back.
Yes, and I will. Room number 1, Dr. Anselin, and room number 2, Yulia, and room number 3, Joshua Patterson. So I create rooms, open rooms. Welcome back to the general session and to the last day of the conference, Pandemic Pedagogy, Lesson Learned, Moving Forward. What an amazing experience it has been. And we want to finish our conference with these powerful words. Dr. Taylor.
In looking at ways to summarize what this has been about, I wanted to share something that Steve Jobs wrote many years ago. And he's talking about businesses, he's talking about engineers, but listen to the message. He says the people who built the Silicon Valley, they were engineers. They learned business. They learned a lot of different things, but they had a real belief that humans, if they worked hard with other creative, smart people, could solve most of humankind's problems. And I believe that very much. That's what he says. But when we came together with this conference or for this conference and in the other things that we do, I think we can say that I believe it very much. I believe that creative, smart people could solve most of humankind's problems. And in the conversations, in the discourse that we had, everything came back to teaching to humanity, being collaborative, engaging with others, being good listeners, taking all the things that we learned through the pandemic and providing an empathetic environment for others to learn and grow. Those are the things that Steve Jobs was talking about. And those are the things that can solve humankind's problems, and nothing else can. So we wanted to leave you with that thought. And then we also wanted you to think about the project. You go.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate that level of discourse we generated during this conference. And as you remember, we started on the first day, we had this conversation focusing on lessons learned, or what pandemic pedagogy meant to all of us. And we agreed, and we found that message that we are resilient, and we now know how to do virtual learning and teaching. And lessons learned, and today was the main message was about humanizing the education and making students active, having them a subject of our teaching and learning, not the object. These are powerful messages that we have throughout this conference. And so think about common interests, needs, and common concerns, and common discoveries. Let's stay connected. Let's
and think
continue
about projects.
connect.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Think about projects that you could do with someone that you met during this conference. I keep thinking of so many things.
Yeah, and small projects count.
Cultural connections count.
Innovative ideas count. So let's move forward and think about common interests and common needs, common discoveries. And
think about if you'd like to collaborate on projects throughout the year. There are so many ways that you are now connected through Twitter, through
Facebook.
Exactly.
Social media.
That you can draw threads that we can help you to maintain those contacts.
And we have been asked during this 3-day conference if we have plans for another conference. Though it's a lot of work, but we really think about that we continue this conversation going, and think about making this conference as an annual event. And also another idea came to mind that we can compile all the ideas, all the proposals that presenters submitted to us. We can make a book of chapters. And if you are interested, please let us know.
And including your insights, those of you who are participants, and what you gained from the experience. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we shared our new collaborations at the Pandemic Pedagogy Conference in 2022? So something
go ahead.
We just wanted to leave you with that thought. And let us know what you think now. Thumbs up. What do you think?
Yeah, and so I just want to remind you that these are the presenters of the conference. We are very grateful to your contributions to this amazing event. We also want to thank, and I think all of you who were participating in the conference are very grateful to our moderators. This officer's team of Kappa Delta Pi Sigma Tau chapter, President Julia Loda, Vice President Lindsay, Secretary General, Fundraising Chair Christy, Social Media Manager Nicole, Historian Lauren, Treasurer Caitlin, Co-Membership Chair Megan, and Co-Membership Chair for Graduate School Courtney. These are the certificates for all our presenters. So these are just examples what they look like. Each presenter will get the certificate of presentation of appreciation for this contribution to this conference. And we would like you to give your feedback. So we didn't do feedback on each day. So there will be workshops and keynote talks in this Google form. But the main thing is your experience, your feedback will be very appreciated. So somebody will give the link in the chat. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I just don't have the chat in front of me. So, so these are, thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions, and applause to everybody.
Without a
And
doubt.
these are the snapshots of our conference. And if you were taking snapshots during the conference, please share them with us.
And I'm reading the chat, and your responses are just heartwarming. So thank you so much for your comments, and so much passion, so much appreciation in here. And we hope that we remember all of the things that we learn and keep this with us.
Before we leave, could we all take one more picture together?
I think that's a good idea.
I stopped sharing. Oops. Just okay. Unmute your videos.
And we can't take a picture till people are visible.
Oh, my video is still used. Oh,
is somewhere else.
All right, everyone, ready? Let's smile. Ready? Okay, one more. Okay, just one more for good luck.
Did you get both rooms? You got both rooms?
All screens?
Because it's Lindsay, of course she did.
One more.
Oh, okay. Okay, my smile.
Everybody smile. Everybody smile. Wonderful.
Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow, many of you. And I'm going to stop recording. How does that sound?
Okay.